Good evening. I'm Dana Plunkett, Director of Counseling. Welcome to the junior family presentation. We're thrilled to have you joining us this evening. As it just announced, we are recording this presentation so that if you want to reference it later or if you know somebody who's not able to join us tonight, the presentation as well as a slide deck that we'll be using will be on the counseling website probably tomorrow morning. So feel free to reference that as you and your student navigate this post-secondary journey. Joining me this evening are three members of our counseling department: Katrina Martin, Mary Jane Walker, and Renee Vasquez. And we also have an admissions panel joining us who we'll hear from shortly, and I'll introduce them a little bit later on. But again, we're pleased that you're joining us this evening. If you have questions over the course of this presentation, we will have an opportunity at the end for a Q&A, but you certainly can add them to the Q&A part of the of your Zoom link, so that we might be able to answer some of the questions as we go along. Mary Jane will be monitoring that as we go along. So again, we want to get going this evening and provide you as much information as possible. So first, I want to remind you, I'm going to pull my slide deck up here, and we will get going with the presentation. There we are, and I will put it in slide deck mode. There we go. So again, welcome. I want to remind you of who the counselors are we have in the department working with your juniors. Now that we sort of turn the page on the new year and we've got our seniors well applied to their institutions for their post-secondary plans, we turn our attention to your students and are busy working with them in small groups and individually. And we'll do so over the course of this year and throughout next year to help them with their post-secondary planning. So again, we break up our students by alphabet, by the last name. And if you haven't had the pleasure of meeting some of your student's school counselor over the last 2 years, we encourage you to reach out and get to know them during this post-secondary process. So again, each of our 8 school counselors are really enjoying working with your students right now, and they'll continue to help them with the journey in their post-secondary plans over the course of the next 18 months. For this evening purposes, again, we'll start with Renee Vasquez giving us sort of an overview of how the department will support you in this process. And then we'll shift our attention to our panelists, Ben Kaufman from McAllister College, Dominique Harrison from North Carolina Agriculture and Technology State University, and John Gillard, I believe I said that correctly, from University of Pennsylvania. And we'll close out this evening with a brief Q&A for some of the questions that might be lingering that haven't been answered over the course of our presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Renee, who again is just going to give you an overview. And a lot of this information is what we're sharing with your juniors. We met with them in the fall to kind of let them know what was going to happen later this year. So most of this information is what your students already have, but it kind of gets you on the same page of them. So I'm going to turn it over to Renee.
Thank you, Dana. So I'm excited to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know, a weeknight is not always easy, so we really appreciate it, and we're excited to have opportunities like Zoom to really be able to reach and get the information out to as many people as possible. As Dana said, we did already have some group meetings. I'll go into some of the information that we shared with juniors. But again, I'm Renee Vasquez. I'm one of the school counselors, and I know I speak on behalf of all of us when I say that we're really excited to get to work with each one of your juniors. And it's just an exciting time. So it's an exciting time to be thinking about, we find that kids are doing earlier and earlier. They're starting to think about life after high school, and they're starting to plan for it. Partly out of necessity, because that is how the college admissions process is happening, and partly out of just more information and more opportunities. So there's a lot of information out there, and part of our role in the process is to help them to know where to start and what the different resources are. This slide here is talking just about our planning vision. So, a lot of times there's this idea that if they're not already doing something, they're behind. And so students kind of sometimes come into junior year thinking they already should have their whole lives figured out. And so we really try to help them to understand that no matter where they are in the process, we are here to help them We're going to be with them every step of the way. Four-year college is the vast majority of Needham High School graduates and what they do after high school, but that's not necessarily the path for everyone. So whether your student is going to directly to a four-year college or two-year or military or certificate or the trade or working or gap year or the endless opportunities that are out there, we will help them in the process. So that's first and foremost. Tonight is going to be focused mainly on the four-year application process. Because, again, that's the vast majority of our Needham High School graduates going directly to a four-year college. We really do want the process, and we try to encourage the process to be student-centered, student-driven, and really individualized, meaning just because they had an older sibling that went there, just because their best friend is applying to a certain group of colleges, doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the best fit for them. And we tell students this all the time. I mean, we have plus or minus 6,000 colleges and universities just in this country alone. And so the hard part is really figuring out how do you narrow it down, because the truth is there's going to be many places that would be a great fit for each student. And we really try to echo the idea that college is not a prize, it's not a trophy. It really should be a match, and finding a place that a kid can really thrive and get to know themselves and get to study and work and be in a place that they really would like to be after graduation. So these are just some of the general guidelines that we give students when we first start talking about life after high school. Thank you, Dana. This is a quick overview. So like Dana said, we already in October went into the junior wellness classes. So we didn't necessarily separate by our caseloads. So it may or may not have been their specific counselor who came and presented to them. But junior wellness is great because they're all taking that class. So it's a great way for us to go in right at the beginning of the year, first few weeks of school, and be able to say, okay, we know there's a buzz, we know there's some concern and some worry about you being behind. Here's the timeline of things that are going to be coming up so that you know what to expect, and also so that you can start planning and really be prepared as you go through the process. So that was kind of the initial just overview and timeline of what to expect. Now this is kind of the official kickoff for the second semester, where we will be following up with some reminders about those group meetings, and then also individual meetings and going through individual plans, which I'll go into in a little bit. But the main thing we want students to be doing junior year is to explore. Again, there's so many options out there that it's really just a matter of understanding what opportunities are in front of them. So since COVID, everything has really pushed towards being online. Colleges really have done such a great job getting information sessions on there, recorded virtual tours, really endless information directly on college websites, and also, through different search websites like SCORE, which is a program that we've introduced students to in 10th grade with a career component. And now we're using it this year in terms of a college search component. Those of you who maybe had older children who went through the process, we used to use a program called Naviance. We've moved over to SCORE, and so far we're really happy with that change. It's definitely supported our students very well. So they have some online career searches you can do. College Board has something called Big Future, which is a college search that you can do. We want students getting on as many campuses as possible. That really is the way that they're going to start to paint a picture of what the different things that they really like or dislike about a school. And the only way to know is to get out there and to actually see some of these schools. So as much as they can get on campuses, we really try to have them do that in person. College fairs are great. We will always try to share that information with students, whether it's from News from the Hill or on our website, which I'm going to show you soon. And we really try to get that information out. College fairs are great. You can go around and get lots of information about a whole bunch of schools all at once. And then our counseling website, which we have revamped, and I'm going to go through a couple of the highlights of things that might be helpful to you in the process. We also gave them an overview about standardized testing, SATs, ACTs. Many schools still are test optional, but understanding when might be a good time to take that test. We talked a little bit about in March is going to be kind of the beginning of students requesting letters of recommendation from teachers. So we kind of gave them that heads up way back at the beginning of the year to say, hey, junior year is a great opportunity, not just because being a good student means building a relationship with your teacher, but also because come the spring, where you're going to be asking some of your junior teachers for letters of recommendation. Um, School counselors write a letter as well for each of our students. We don't ask that they request it separately, but each one of us do have a questionnaire for students to just tell us a little bit more about themselves. There's plenty that we do know and plenty of great things we can say about them, but sometimes having a really context to their 4-year high school experience can be super helpful to colleges on the admission side of things. And we also have what's called the parent brag sheet, where parents can have an opportunity to have some input to the counselor letter as well, so that we can really do a great job capturing the whole essence of high school and what that was like for your child. Every student will also be working on the Common App essay in their English class, regardless of what level English they're taking. Each English class will do that as an assignment in the spring. Our advice to them is to really take it seriously. A lot of students just do it as a homework assignment and just to kind of get it done. But it's a great opportunity to see what the Common App writing prompts are. Each year they're usually similar, but sometimes there's some changes. But to see what the prompts are, to see what types of essays they would need to write, and then to actually write one and get some real feedback from their English teacher. Their school counselors are available to review them as needed. And so that's a really great opportunity for students to get started with that as well. So following this meeting, we are going to kick off throughout the rest of the winter and the spring. We're going to be looking at one-on-one meetings with students. And so a really important part of that is sitting with juniors and thinking about their senior year schedule. So for some students, they already have an idea of what they want to take, and it's just a matter of figuring out how do you fit so many courses into 7 periods. um, and for some students, they really have a specific major in mind that they want to move on to, and so making sure that their courses are in line with that is something that we discuss one-on-one. We do look at SCORE with them. Again, SCORE is something that we introduce them to in 10th grade, but we use it differently each year. 11th grade, there's a lot of college research they can do in there. And then in 12th grade, they're going to be using it to send, the school counselors will use it to send letters of rec, transcripts, school profile, and some other documents directly to the colleges. We also will look at that point and say, okay, have you been able to get on any campuses? Are there any schools that you're already looking at, and what research have you already done? If none, then that's okay, and we can start talking about some of the ways to get out there and explore. But hopefully, and most frequently, many students do have an idea of some schools, at least, that they think they'd like to look at. So we look at that list, and we might go through and have a discussion about that. We talk about plans individually for standardized testing. Some students may opt not to even take an SAT or ACT and really focus on applying to optional schools. And some students, take it once, twice. And so making a plan for that is important. We talk about who they might ask for those letters of recommendation in the spring. And we'll ask more about what their exploration plan is for the spring and then going into the summer. And of course, if students are looking at athletic recruitment, if they're looking to do something other than a 4-year college track, or maybe they're applying to a particular program, like, for example, architecture, maybe they need a portfolio to put together, maybe they're doing a dance audition or something in addition to just the typical application. So these are really specific plans that we make with every single student, and that go on throughout the whole rest of the spring and certainly into senior year as well. This is, again, a little bit of what I just said in terms of exploring, but that exploration will continue through the summer. So throughout the summer, we're hoping that kids are still getting on campuses. They're starting to kind of fine tune their list of where they'd like to apply. At that point, we're hoping that they are either fine tuning their college essays that they started in English class, or if they're kind of starting from scratch, that they're getting working on those. We hope that in the summer, so as of August 1st for this graduating junior class, the application will be open, the Common App. For those of you who don't know, this is your first time through the process. The Common App it's one application that's accepted by over 900 colleges and universities, and it's most of the big name ones that students end up applying to. And so it's a great idea for students after August 1st to get onto Common App, create an account, and just see what the actual application looks like. So it's not such a big, scary thing in their minds. Throughout senior year, we actually do have a family night very similar to what we're doing tonight. We'll be again meeting with seniors in the fall to talk about the nuts and bolts more of the application in the Common App. And then we follow up with a family night to kind of make sure that you are in the know as well and that you understand what messaging we're giving them with what they need to do to meet their deadlines. And then also they're going through and submitting their actual applications. We will talk to them a little bit about financial aid, applying for scholarships and things like that. And then throughout senior year, they're getting their decisions and evaluating what school they might go to. And May 1st is the universal time usually where students have to choose which school they're going to enroll at. Okay, so I'm excited to show you this because we have spent a lot of time putting as many resources as possible to streamline. And we've really put our heads together to think, okay, how can we get so much information out there to make it accessible to anybody who's looking for it? And so we've decided to use our website a little bit better than we have been in the past. Unfortunately, it is still a work in progress, and as can be evidenced by, it's a little clunky to get to. So when you get to the Needham High School website, you can see the pink arrow at the top. It says under Student Services, you'll see the Counseling Department tab. When you click on it, this is the screen that comes up. And so we highlight it only because that bottom pink arrow, that tiny little link that says click here, that is what you need to click on to actually get to our website. So we apologize that it's not more out there and visible for you, but we wanted to show it to you here just because getting to it is probably the first hurdle. Okay, so once you get to our page, this is what it looks like. So you can see the whole left bar. This is not, these are just screenshots, so we can't really scroll through, but the whole left bar is all kinds of tabs and information. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is just the home page. You can see right now the Junior Family Night is posted there. Some of these events have already happened this year. And so any like big events that are going on that you know counseling is part of or that we think would be helpful for students, we post here. If we were able to scroll down, you can kind of see the news to know right below it. And so there's a lot of just any information that becomes available to us. We try to keep that up to date. You'll also see the breakdown of the counseling department on the left side. There's the copy of the school profile, the graduation requirements. So these are just some things that might be helpful to have handy for you. Okay, what I really want to focus on is the 4 years at a glance. So this is again on the left tab. If you clicked on 4 years at a glance, right now we're clicked on the 11th grade. Each year we have different things and different focuses that we have for students, but this is the junior year one, and I circled in pink the timeline link, which would bring you to a document of the junior year timeline. It's everything that I just said to expect, but in much more detail, along with lots of other links to kind of help you get started. And then these presentations that's circled in pink as well is the copy of the slideshow presentation that the counselors presented in wellness. So if your student maybe was absent in wellness or they're saying, what? I have no idea what you're talking about. The slideshow is right there. It's very accessible for you and for them, and you don't have to worry about having missed that. You can also see there's tons of other links right there for you about standardized testing, about how to get started in terms of developing a list, about how to research schools, essay writing. There's just so much on there. So we hope that this is really helpful and accessible to all of you. I also want to draw attention to that left tab. So if you were to click on post-secondary information and planning, there's about a dozen tabs there on the left there that really cover so many things. There's the application workbook is like 100-page workbook that really walks you through the beginning to end of how do you even start researching schools? What types of things would you look for? How do you find a college fit? How do you understand selectivity of schools and how that comes to play? How do you develop a list? How do you get started on a college essay? How do you think about college standardized testing? If you want to get athletically recruited and you're thinking about the NCAA eligibility, how do I do that? So you can see there's so many tabs on the side there, and there's lots of great information. So if this is, particularly if this is your first time going through the process with a child, I think you'll find this particularly helpful. Just want to highlight, as I mentioned, not every student goes directly to a four-year school. There's plenty of really great opportunities and alternatives to a four-year college. This is a great tab to check out. You can see military if a student wanted to do a post-grad year, professional and trade schools, taking a gap year. There's a lot of information on there. You can barely see it. It's right on the bottom of the left side, but also a link for community service. So if you have a student who really hasn't gotten started on their community service, that's a great place to get started and get some ideas. Okay, financial aid. So getting accepted to a college is just the first step, right? Then you're thinking about how to finance a college education these days is quite an important part of the puzzle. So start those discussions now, preferably. Start as you're, starting the research process, thinking about financially really what the impact on your family is going to be, and really what types of schools and things would be a good financial fit. That's not the focus for tonight's conversation, but save the date, March 20th. We're going to have a MIFA presentation about financial aid. They'll go through everything you need to know about applying for financial aid, and just the two big things that you'll probably hear about. FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. So all colleges will accept that if you're applying for aid. And some colleges will require that you also do, in addition, not instead of, but in addition to the FAFSA, some will also require the CSS profile. And so again, we won't get into that detail tonight, but it's definitely a huge part of the puzzle as you're thinking about college. And so please save the date for March 20th. Lastly, I talked for a long time and I can't wait to turn it over to our admissions reps to kind of give you the inside scoop. But lastly, I just want to say again, there is a pathway for every single student. We will meet your child where they're at. Selectivity does not define the quality of education. My favorite thing when students sit with me, they're like, I'm going to apply to this Ivy League school just to see if I can get accepted. And while that might be fun and good, it's also not necessarily an indicator of the quality of education that a student will get just because a school is super selective. So keep that in mind. Cast a wide net, and we will help students wherever they're at. And I hope that in addition to all of the stress that we talk about in terms of applying to schools, I hope that there can also be some excitement and fun in terms of thinking about what's next for your child.
Thank you, Renee. That fabulous overview. And again, it was a lot of information, most of which we definitely have on the website. And because this is being recorded and the slide deck, you can always refer to it. It's kind of at this stage of the game, drinking from a fire hose. But again, a great overview of the work we've been doing with your students so far. So what I'd like to do is sort of turn to our experts on the other side of the admissions desk, our panelists this evening. And again, a reintroduction from Macalester College, Ben Kaufman from North Carolina Agriculture and Technology University, which is an HBCU institution, Dominique Harrison, and University of Pennsylvania, John, is it Gillard? I want to make sure I've got it correct. So what I'd like to do is first ask each of our panelists to kind of give a brief overview of their institution, but also importantly, their type of institution, whether it's a small institution, a larger institution, or one that has some specialties to it, so that our audience can better understand maybe, what their type of institution could offer you, and also if you all can tell us what your role is at your given institution, that would be great. So why don't we start with the University of Pittsburgh? That would be great.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time. My name, again, yes, you had it right. It's John Gillard. I am an enrollment services manager for the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a regionally based enrollment services manager. So I actually live here in New England. I live in the Metro West area, but I am originally from Pennsylvania. So I've been living here for the last 12 years almost. I've been in higher education for almost 15 years. And so a couple of things about the University of Pittsburgh is that we are what's referred to as a Tier 1 research institution. What that means for students, especially undergraduate students, is access to not only faculty, but faculty-led research opportunities for students as undergraduate students. The other big thing for us is at the University of Pittsburgh, we have 6 entry-level schools, meaning Swanson School of Engineering, and administration. So for us, the uh, the biggest thing is making sure that students have access to internships and also opportunities to do co-ops. One of the nice things I think about us is certainly our location. We have the third largest growing airport in the country right now, the Pittsburgh International Airport. We also help students with access throughout the city. So students at the University of Pittsburgh have access to the public transit system, which is extraordinarily helpful to get around to all those opportunities. We are also an NCAA Division I school, so we are part of the ACC. We actually just were in a bowl game, and we had a Rhode Island native start in the bowl game. He was a walk-on, so that was really really cool to have New England represented in a bowl game, which is really really great. Um, the other big thing for us is also community. So we do have a lot of opportunities for students to explore opportunities in the community service-based area, making sure that we have a really good and strong relationship with the city of Pittsburgh. We also have what we call the UPMC, a University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. We have five large hospitals on our campus. And so that might give you a picture of thinking that we are a strictly urban setting, but we also have a 400-acre park called Shenley Park right across the street as well. So we have a very unique sense of both urban, suburban kind of setting for students when thinking about their next steps and moving into I don't want to say up and coming, but certainly a city that is on the rise, or certainly getting a rebirth, which is what they're going towards. So thank you so much again for having me, and I'll pass it on to my next colleague.
Great. We'll ask Dominique Harrison from North Carolina Agriculture and Technology University to not only speak about his university, but also the opportunities that an HBCU institution offers students.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. My name is Dominique Harrison. I have the pleasure of serving as Director of Undergraduate Admissions at North Carolina A&T State University. We are the largest HBCU in the nation, located in Greensboro, North Carolina. I have to give a shout out to John and the University of Pittsburgh. Our new chancellor this year was the former U.S. Steel Dean of their engineering college, and he has joined us, so we're really happy to have Chancellor Martin with us, coming from the University of Pittsburgh. But again, we are a mid-sized institution. We're right over 14,000 at 14,300 students. We have a lot of different majors that we do offer. Some of the areas that we're known for is engineering, agriculture, and environmental sciences areas, the fine arts as well, and a lot of the other STEM areas. We're the number one producer of African Americans in the country with degrees in engineering, agriculture, psychology, and a few other areas as well. One of the great things about North Carolina A&T, we're located in the heart of Greensboro, North Carolina, but also kind of in the heart of North Carolina. If you're familiar with some of our larger cities, we're the third largest city. A lot of people are familiar with Raleigh and also Charlotte as well. We're actually about an hour and 10 minutes from both, right nestled in the middle. We also have a lot of opportunities for students to find community on campus, over 160 student organizations, a lot of ways to become involved. As the largest HBCU, we always like to remind families that no matter your background, no matter where you're from, there's a space for you on our campus. And that's one of the things that we really want to make sure that our students and our faculty and staff members are feeling included in the work that they do, but also in the spaces that they habitat on our campus. So I think that's something that's very important. As a HBCU, we also take pride in being leaders, not just in the HBCU community, but also in higher ed in a lot of different areas, making sure that we are taking care of students. We're currently an R2 institution. John spoke a little bit about being a Research 1 institution. We're actually, our goal is to reach that status in the next few years and become the first HBCU to obtain an R1 status in regards to research. In the state of North Carolina, within the UNC system, the past few years, we've been number 2 in research opportunities and research funding for the entire state. And also, out of all the UNC system schools, which are state school system within North Carolina, our graduates graduate with the second highest salaries, which is also important. That means parents, we're helping get them out of your pockets, right? But thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening and looking forward to communicating.
Yeah. Dominique, I'm going to pause here and just ask you to speak about HBCUs in general and what students should consider when they're looking at those particular types of opportunities.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the great things about HBCUs is the reason we were founded. We were founded because there wasn't a space for us to gain the opportunity for higher education. That also helps us keep forward the mission of inclusivity and also making sure that we're not just exuding pride, but exuding excellence. One of the things that you can find on many HBCU campuses, and one of the things I love about ours is there's not a space of higher education in the world that you can step on as a minority student and see more extremely educated doctors, lawyers, educators with terminal degrees that look like you on a space like our campus. There's also not a space that you can step in where you're going to encounter and be able to interact with more students that are like-minded from similar backgrounds, that have the type of drive and passion and backgrounds, looking forward and working with each other towards commonality and common goals. I think it's really important to think of where we started and where we are and where we're continuing to go. I always encourage students and their families to visit a lot of our websites and look at the virtual tours to see the beauty of our campuses. Also, look at our strategic plans. We all have our strategic plans outlined and on our websites, and that'll give you an idea of what our future goals are as institutions and the steps that we're taking to make sure that we get there. You're going to find some of the same state-of-the-art equipment, state-of-the-art faculty and staff members. We have a large and wonderful honors college where we're putting out students who are applying for some of the most prestigious scholarships, such as the Goldwater Scholarship, Rhodes Scholars, and many, many others. And so I want to make sure that I'm driving home the fact that anything that you're looking for in your next step educationally, you can find at HBCU as well.
Great, thank you, Dominique. And I also want to say, Renee had commented on our website. We post a lot of local college fairs, including one in the fall that is specifically designed to host and promote HBCU institutions from around the country. So again, that's something to look at our website that happens every fall. So thank you, Dominique. And now we'll turn it over to Ben Kaufman, McAllister College.
Hello, good evening. Thanks for everyone for being here. My name is Ben Kaufman. I use he, him pronouns, and I work at McAllister College, which is a small, private liberal arts and sciences college located the furthest distance away this evening in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is one half of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis being the other half. Happy to talk a little bit about McAllister and then talk a little bit about liberal arts and sciences institutions and what that might look like for folks in the audience. For McAllister specifically, we are a small college, about 2,100 students, all undergraduate focused. We do not have any graduate programs, no medical school, no law school, no graduate students. Everything that we do at McAllister is focused on your undergraduate education. A few ways in which that manifests itself is you will expect small class sizes at McAllister and at other liberal arts and sciences colleges. The average class size at Mac is 17 students. Student to faculty ratio is 10 to 1, so it's very much a small, intimate classroom environment, discussion-based atmosphere, very collaborative atmosphere as well. You also can find at McAllister the ability to have a small experience, get to know people in your community, while still being in an urban area. I mentioned we're in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, which is a metropolitan area of currently about 3.5 million people. There are many direct flights on various airlines from Logan Airport to MSP Airport every single day. So it's, yes, by mileage a little bit further away, but it's actually not that difficult to get to by airline. A few other things about McAllister to note. We are a mission-driven institution. We do have a big focus on this idea of global citizenship, really trying to understand and appreciate how to be an effective member, not just of a local community, but of a global society and every community scale in between. We do have 4 core values that help us to understand this idea of global citizenship. Those core values are academic excellence, internationalism, multiculturalism, and service to society. Talk a little bit about what those mean. Academic excellence should be pretty self-explanatory. We do care about our academics at McAllister, as students do at most colleges and universities. About 96% of our students will engage in some form of civic engagement, community service during their time at Macalester. It's not a requirement that students do so, and yet almost all of our students do find time and really invest themselves in some form of service. We do recruit students from all around the United States. All 50 US states are represented. Massachusetts typically falls in the top 5 most represented states on our campus. So you would be by no means the only kid from Boston or from the Boston area or from wherever in Massachusetts you are coming out to Macalester. We do also recruit students internationally. Student body currently represents 108 different countries of citizenship, and students really do speak a number of different languages, come from a number of different backgrounds, different walks of life. So there's a little bit of a flavor at Macalester is that it's not just a school in Minnesota, but it really does have a global feel and a global impact. And again, we do recruit students from different types of schools, different backgrounds, and so forth. The other thing I want to make sure to mention is that we are a private institution. We do not have in-state tuition, out-of-state tuition. We have a sort of starting price for everyone who comes to Macalester, but we do provide a lot of financial assistance to our students and families. About 90% of our students receive financial aid, whether it's a merit scholarship or need-based financial aid or a combination of both. We do commit to meeting 100% of demonstrated need, which means if you cannot afford our full price, that's okay. We will fill in whatever kind of cost gap there is for you, for your family, for your household. And we really are committed to doing that for every student and family who needs financial assistance. I want to touch a little bit on liberal arts and sciences more broadly and what that looks like. Schools like Macalester that focus on liberal arts and sciences education really emphasize interdisciplinary forms of learning. That you, of course, will be able to major in a particular field of study, pursue a minor if you would like to in another field. But for most students at schools like Macalester, they're not just studying one thing, they're studying a wide range of opportunities, a wide range of fields and disciplines. So a lot of students do a double major or a major and a minor. Schools like Macalester tend to have some form of a general distribution curriculum where you will be required to take courses in different areas of study. Depending on the school that you're looking at for liberal arts and sciences, some schools might have a strict core curriculum. Some schools might have an open curriculum where you just have to take a certain number of credits in a certain number of areas on campus. Macalester is sort of in the middle, where we do have students take courses in different clusters of study, different groupings, but you get to choose the courses to get those credits out of the way. I think another aspect of liberal arts and sciences institutions is that there is very much an emphasis on choosing the path that is right for you, and also being able to change your mind about that path. A lot of students who come to Macalester and come to liberal arts and sciences colleges are undecided in what they want to major in, and that's okay. At schools like Mac, it's common to not have to pick a major until the end of your second year of study. So you have time to explore, discover different areas, and see what's going to be a good fit for you, and choose one field, or in a lot of cases, choose more than one academic field if you are interested in doing so. We also have students who know exactly what they want to do, and they stick exactly with that path. So there's a lot of flexibility and discovery that's involved in a liberal arts and sciences institution.
Super. Thank you, Ben. That's hugely helpful. I want to remind our audience who's joined us this evening that if you have questions for our panelists or even for the department, that you're welcome to put them in the Q&A. I'm going to move to just asking our panelists a couple of sort of standard questions that most people have, and then again, we'll move into the Q&A. So again, but thank you for that overview. That was hugely helpful to help us sort of put your institutions into context. I'd like to sort of hear from each of you, and again, if you feel that somebody has answered the question fully, you don't necessarily have to answer each of these questions. But a lot of people at this stage of the game, our students, are sort of searching for colleges, doing their research, trying to find the right fit. And if you have some thoughts about kind of how do you learn about that? How do you figure that out? What should you do? How can, if you can't get on campus, how can I learn about your institutions? And just kind of the general going through the process at this stage of the game. How would you advise our students to find the right fit and consider sort of where and how they want to begin this journey and sort of move through it, particularly this year? So John, we'll hear from you, and then obviously Dominique and Ben certainly willing to jump in as well.
So I just realized that I actually went first. That's why I put my hand down.
That's great.
The last time. No, so one of the the best things about where you all are is your location. So the biggest piece of advice that I typically tell families, especially if you're just starting the process and it's your first student, is go to every type of institution. Go to the small school, go to the large school, go to the urban school, go to the suburban school, go to the rural school. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an official visit. Just go experience those campuses. Academically speaking, in my opinion, most institutions will come to, you when it comes to the academic side. It's really at this point, like you're talking about, and your colleague already kind of hit on it, which is finding the fit, right? So exploring the different types. And again, we live, because I'm regionally based, I can say that we live in such a space where you have all the different types. You have the privates, you have the publics, you have the large, the small. So just get out there and really experience those different types of opportunities, whether it's an official visit or if it's just you're driving through, Chestnut Hill and BC is right there.
Well, I would just add also think of what you want out of your college experience. Maybe do an exercise where you just take some notes and write down some things that, when you think about how do I want my college experience to go? What type of majors am I interested in? Doesn't have to be just one, but what areas or majors am I interested in? What size college do I think I'm interested in? Location. That can be everything from part of the country, closer to home, further away from home, city, more rural. I want a school where it's in the mountains, whatever that might look like for you. What type of size do you think you'll be more comfortable in? Some want a stadium with 100,000 people during football season, and some are okay with not having Division I athletics and maybe a smaller athletics teams or even club sports is good enough. So really take some time to think about what you want out of your college experience, and that will change as you visit schools. You'll begin to visit schools and you'll say, you know what, I really thought I wanted this huge school, but it might be a little bit too much. Maybe I don't want to figure out how to get across campus, figure out where I'm going to stay. There's too many people in the classrooms and the meeting spaces and the student union. Or maybe you may say, I need a really small college. This is what I want. And then you go and you say, you know what? I could use a big stadium. So definitely take the opportunity to research and look, but also take some time to kind of write out and think about what it is that right now that you're thinking of that you really want for your college experience.
Ben, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a couple things. I totally agree and echo with what both my colleagues have said. It's important to visit schools. They don't have to be schools you're interested in, just a school that's close by that doesn't require much travel, that'll help you with that list of what you're looking for. I think equally as important is, are there things you do not want in your college experience? You don't want a particular climate or a particular environment, or you don't want to be far from home, or you don't want to be close to home. These are all things to think about as well. The other thing I'll mention in relation to just visiting schools and seeing what's out there is, here we are on Zoom. Most colleges and universities have things on Zoom or Google Meets or a recorded info session and tour. Go to our websites, learn more about different schools and what their core values are, what their experiences are, what their students like to do for fun on the weekends. All of this can happen virtually. You don't even have to leave your home for some of that exploration. I do think it's important to leave your home for some of that exploration, but you can do a lot on your computer as well.
And as John alluded to, we are fortunate that we're in the Boston area where there's about 35 colleges just in the immediate Boston area. And then if you start going to 128 or 495, that you can get on the types of campuses that you might be interested in. And if you're not able to actually get on the actual campus of the institution, if you've been accepted, there are accepted students days that most colleges have it. At that point, you can start spending the time and energy to hop on campuses. So it doesn't have to happen all before you apply. John, I see you nodding. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Dominique had said, and I think one of your colleagues had mentioned earlier, which is one of the best things is as all of your friends are also visiting these schools, um, listen to what they are saying because as you're making these lists, and as Dominique and Ben pointed out, you're making these lists. So the things that your friends may not have liked about a certain institution that they went to, that might be something that you're actually looking for. So, maybe that wasn't what they're looking for, but maybe that's what you're looking for. So really try to pay attention, and that way, it helps kind of solidify those lists for yourself.
That's also why the counseling department puts a real emphasis on this being an individualized process for just the reason John said. What your student may necessarily like or not like in a college is not the same as what their peer is. So their peer may go to a school and be very excited and say, you absolutely have to look at this school. But if it doesn't have the major or if it's not the location you want to be, it may not be the right school for you. So again, this is a very individualized process, and something that we emphasize in the department is to stay focused on your college search and what's important to you, not what may be important to your peers or your best friend. And that way you'll find the good match. Let's move forward on one thing that really perplexes a lot of students and families, the evaluation of transcripts and applications. So when students apply, what are you looking for? How are you approaching this when you receive the applications and you're starting to make decisions about the students who are applying to your institutions? What are you looking for? What matters? And how can students put their best foot forward in the application process? Whoever wants to chime in first, and then we'll hear from the other three.
I'll go ahead and start. I think, and this is something that you will hear through the admissions process as you talk to different schools, you hear different presentations from schools, you do visits. Admissions office's favorite answer is it depends. It's always going to depend, right? Some things depend on you individually, but a lot of things just depend on the type of institutions. When you're looking at the holistic review process, that's when schools are going to look at the entire package that you provide them. And so with that, one thing that I always encourage students to do is when you're completing your applications, if they provide something that says optional and you're able to provide it, go ahead and provide that. If they have an optional essay, a optional list of activities, if there's something optional that you can provide to them, definitely go ahead and provide that because it gives offices more information to look at. It gives them a fuller picture of you as a student, but also as an individual. I also think it's very important, especially when you're applying to even smaller institutions with smaller populations. Look at the school's mission statement. See what the school values. That will tell you some of what schools are looking for. I think back to a school that I worked at, and I was reading an admissions essay. And if any of you are familiar with a coal roller, the big trucks that they have the big smokestack that comes out of it, and when they rev it up, all the smoke blows out. Well, they wrote their essay about how much they love their coal roller, and they would blow and they would make it blow smoke. Well, the school that I worked at, our number one tenet was sustainability and the environment. That probably wasn't the best essay to write for our school at that time. So those are things that can be important as you're looking at your application, thinking about the holistic review process and what admissions officers may be looking for. I'll leave for some of the other, because I know we'll probably cross over a lot with some of the other top bullet points on here, but I did want to kind of point that out as you're thinking about what schools are looking for holistically.
Ben or John?
Yeah, I'd be happy to chime in a little bit here. Totally agree with what Dominique was saying. I think another layer is it's okay to ask an admissions office how they review your application. In fact, you should ask how we will review your application because, as Dominique said, you might get a different answer from every school that you're looking at. Some institutions might tell you that a certain test score or a certain GPA gets you admission. Some schools might tell you, we're going to look at holistic approach. We're going to look at everything and see what that's about. Some schools might be more focused on not just what kind of student are you, but what kind of a community member are you. Some schools might do rolling admission, in which case they might give you an admission decision 2 weeks after you apply. So there's so many different variations in what this looks like. Please ask these questions. We're here as vessels of information. We're here to help you understand how to apply to our schools. So make sure to ask those questions. I think when it comes to the transcript in particular, the biggest piece of advice I can offer, which hopefully clears up some level of tension or stress, is when it comes to the transcript, your transcript is what it is. You've already done the work to get to the GPA, to pursue the curriculum you've pursued, what have you. We will review it. However, we are going to review it from one school to the next. That is out of your control. I think that's one piece that some people really get caught up in the application, is that you have to be able to control everything in your application process, but so much of it is not within your control. Put forward what you can put forward and let the cards fall where they may. I think that's a big part of this process, is not every school is going to look at your application the same. And that's actually a good thing. You want schools to bring in their mission and their values, as Dominique was mentioning, to look at the mission of a school. And if a school's mission doesn't align with yours, that's okay. Not every school is a perfect fit for everyone. And it's important to understand that there are some things you can control and some things that you can't.
Thank you, Ben. John, anything to add?
Yeah, so one thing that I do like to tell families is, as you're going through this process, is to think about creating a family email for the process, not for the application, but for this process, so that you can have shared documents on exactly all of these things, right? So the list of schools, the dates, the deadlines, the GPA requirements, the all of these things, it typically makes life a little bit easier when you have that shared email, and then you have that shared document within that email. Because that way nobody's saying, "Oh, did you get that email from XYZ school?" It's all there for everybody to see. The application is different, but certainly when you're doing this process, it definitely can help with that. When it comes to, and just to piggyback on what Dominique and Ben have been saying, at an institution like Pitt, one of the biggest things is, and Ben, you definitely hit home on that, which is your transcript is what your transcript is when you apply. So you really do want to make sure, when you're looking at our engineering program or any engineering program or a nursing program, is that you see what the GPA, the coursework is, so that even though, yes, we believe in the holistic review process, we also believe that we want to set the students up for success. So academically, we want to make sure that students are there. And then we will then look at the holistic review as well. And then one final thing that I will say is that Pitt remains test optional through 2028. So we're very happy to continue with being test optional. And so it really does mean that we are holistic in our review, because we do look at all these things. And I think the other thing about evaluating transcripts and applications is, again, as unique as all of our institutions are, the University of Pittsburgh does not review letters of recommendation. So we actually don't require it as part of the application process. So as Dominique pointed out, those optional essay portions are definitely very important for us, because anything that a letter of recommendation will say, we don't necessarily see it, especially when it comes to if a student changes a course for any particular reason. We want to hear from the student why that might have happened. So you certainly want to make sure to ask those questions, like Ben said, to each individual institution on what's required and what's optional and how that will impact their application.
Great. And John, you're leading right into the final standard sort of stock question we have for you, which is the role of testing. And you've already commented on it. I'll let Ben and Dominique add to it. Just in terms of the role of standardized testing, when to submit it, if it's test optional, what would be the advantage of submitting your scores? What's the difference between test flexible, test blind? And you can see the question. So if John, if you'd like to contribute again or add more to your say, but also Dominique and Ben, please chime in.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in first here. I think the first thing I'll say about test optional is this is not going away. Schools are going to be test optional permanently. Some schools are returning to requiring testing as we get further removed from the pandemic, and some schools have always and will always require testing. This is why it's important to get in touch with each individual admissions office, ask what their policy is, whether they require testing for admission, whether they require testing for merit scholarships, because some schools maybe are test optional for admission, but require testing if you want to be eligible for merit scholarship. So it does depend from school to school. So make sure to ask about that. When to submit your scores, which scores to submit, whether a school super scores different subsections, that all depends from one school to the next. So again, these are the types of things to ask of different institutions. For Macalester and for many of our peer institutions, many other small liberal arts and sciences colleges, a lot of schools like Mac are test optional for the indefinite future. No plans to go back to involving or requiring testing for any part of our process. But we don't know what that'll look like in 5 years or in 10 years or in 20 years. But a lot of schools like Macalester included, recently went test optional and are indefinitely or permanently, nothing's really permanent in this world, but permanently test optional for the foreseeable future. Now, does that mean that you don't have to submit your scores? You don't have to, but you might want to. And whether or not you should submit your scores for a particular school is something you can ask our admissions office. You know, you might have a particular ACT score, a particular SAT score. You might look at our average scores online and see that we have pretty high average scores. So you might be wondering, is my score good enough? Should I submit my score? Will it help my application? Please ask us those questions, because again, you'll get a different answer from each school that might be test optional. So it's important to think about, again, each individual school. Realizing now, this doesn't make it easy on you all, because there's no one size fits all kind of an answer for these questions, but that is why it's really important to ask these questions of each and every school that you are looking at.
Dominique, anything else?
Yeah, I would absolutely just kind of echo everything that Ben kind of just said. Again, reach out to the schools. The websites will definitely have this information as well, so you can search the admissions websites. When you're considering, I think the last bullet point is required for merit scholarship or special programs like honors colleges or other special departmental programs or opportunities they may have for incoming students. Definitely looking and taking note of that. And then also, as Ben also mentioned, just kind of looking at the test ranges that the schools may have posted. And even, again, ask the admissions officer, would this be a competitive test score? Do you have any advice on if this is a score I should or should not submit? But yeah.
Great, thank you. Speaking of colleges and requirements, I do want to pause before we go into just sort of general Q&A to just point out to our families on this webinar the Massachusetts State College and University system and their requirement for applications, because many of our students, even if they're looking beyond Massachusetts, do apply to our state university institutions, being our home territory, so to speak. So again, the requirements are important because a lot of our students do end up applying. So we just added this slide in there for our families to be able to reference, and certainly students who have questions about this can see their school counselor. But as this is our state institution, it's important to know what they require. So what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Katrina Martin to ask a few more questions. I'm going to stop sharing so we get all of our staff also on this. If there have been questions that have come in or other things that we've thought of over the course of the time that our panelists have talking that may sort of contribute to helping us broaden our understanding of this post-secondary process. So Katrina, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, perfect. And I'll just remind any guests, you're more than welcome to add some questions into our little Q&A button. You should see it at the bottom of your Zoom. We've had a couple questions already that have been answered by Mary Jane, but feel free to send those in, and Mary Jane will either type back a response or I can sort of send them out to our admissions reps. So the first one that we have for our reps, how does coming from a high school like Needham with its size, demographics, and competitiveness factor into how applying students are considered, So essentially, how does coming from a sort of competitive school and district like Needham factor into how you're considering the applications? Does it matter where students are coming from? Does it not matter where students are coming from? And maybe a couple or all of you can touch on that.
So I would say again, it depends, but for a lot of schools, especially schools that are doing holistic review, and even when the schools are doing a deeper holistic review, they're oftentimes going to look at you within the context of your school and your environment. So they may not compare you to a student from Boston Catholic. They're not going to look at that school or Boston Memorial, or no, that's two different schools. Catholic Memorial is the school I was thinking of. But so you won't be compared to a school at that. You're going to be looked within your environment, what you have available to you, the resources, how you're challenging yourself within your school environment from the coursework that is available to you. And then there could oftentimes be within that same process where it depends, because there may be opportunities that you're applying for programs such as engineering, where there are, regardless, certain requirements that must be met, certain coursework, grades, GPA, things, again, that we're looking for as institutions to make sure we're setting you up for success, where you may not qualify for the engineering program, but oftentimes you might for general admissions to the university or other majors. So again, that's something you definitely want to speak to the admissions office, and a great question to ask. But yeah, I think that's something that a lot of schools are going to look at you in the context of your environment.
That's great. And I'll just add before Ben or John, if you want to jump in there, some of you might be wondering how the colleges know what kind of resources we offer, a list of classes and things like that. And with every student's application, the school's counselor sends what we call a school profile to every college on behalf of every student. So the school profile is something that's published. It's on our website, I believe. So any of you can see that at any time. And it's essentially a 3 or 4 page document that lists all the courses that we offer, matriculation of former students, some data about our school, so the number of students, and et cetera, et cetera. So that helps to give some context to the admissions representatives to understand where the applicant is coming from, the opportunities that they've had access to, the programs, et cetera. Ben or John, anything else that you want to add to that? Okay. Excellent. So we have in our high school, for anyone who doesn't know, and including the reps, an unweighted GPA. So we don't weight accelerated AP classes higher than honors or college prep, and vice versa. So I'm curious for the reps, if you wouldn't mind speaking to how you, and if you do, like recalculate the GPA on your own scale so that you have a sense of where students are coming from and the level of rigor or challenge that they had at the high school level.
Yeah, this is a great question. And of course, it depends from one school to the next. For Macalester specifically, we do not recalculate GPAs to a common GPA scale. I think part of that is receiving applications from all over the country, all over the world. We see dozens of different GPA scales, and we're not going to spend our time recalculating all those. What we do instead is we spend that time understanding what your GPA means in your context. Dominique mentioned just a minute ago about looking at you within your school. That's part of how we approach your GPA. You use an unweighted GPA scale. Great. I'm going to look at your unweighted 3.6, and I'm going to try to understand, how did you get to that 3.6 at your school? I'm not going to compare your 3.6 to a 3.6 at a different school, because they might have a weighted system or a 5.0 scale or a 3.7 scale. We try to understand at Macalester, what is the scale at your school? And then we will read your GPA accordingly and not recalculate it to another system.
So the University of Pittsburgh, like some of our competitor institutions, use the SAR, or the Self-Reported Academic Record. So the goal being to put students on not an equal or equitable scale to all other students, but certainly take out and use the coursework that is relevant to helping us make a decision. So we really do only try to look at math, science, social sciences, Englishes, to really help in that process. And so for us, what's mandatory is actually the SAR, or the self-reported academic record. Um, and that's actually how we make decisions with in regards to the transcript. We actually don't need the high school transcript until a student has decided to attend the University of Pittsburgh, and we can get their final official high school transcript after that. And that's one of the reasons why, and Ben, I believe you mentioned earlier about rolling admission. The application at the University of Pittsburgh opens in August, and the student can actually submit and complete their application in August because of those factors.
Dominique, anything you want to add to that, or? We're good. Okay. Students and families, just so you know, I know there's been a lot of terminology and so much information that we're sharing tonight, and things like the SRAR and the school profile. We'll go over all these things again in our groups and in our individual meetings. So I just want to put that out there. But a great questions come in. Are there preferences on the admission side of things for whether or not, or excuse me, whether they hear questions from students or parents?
I would say there's nothing wrong as a parent asking a question, but when it comes to the actual application part of that process, we would love to hear from the student. It shows the initiative. It shows that they're taking ownership of their process. If there is a follow-up or something, and they're the ones that are sending it and they're asking that question, we love to hear that. Now, again, there is nothing wrong as a parent, just asking some general questions about the university. If you have questions about, the deadlines or the process, because we know oftentimes they're going off and they're doing things and we have no idea as parents, and they haven't told us they've even applied or they're even considering the school until they ask for the application fee, right? So as a parent, there is no problem with you asking questions, but I think when it gets down to the application process itself and things within the application, we would love to hear that from the student.
Okay, let's see. For about test scores and test optional, first thing that I want to say, I know, Dominique, I think you mentioned this, and John, you mentioned this too, but along the application process, whenever students see something in their application that there's an optional essay or there's an optional open response question, you're always encouraged to do it because it's another opportunity to share your experiences, your perspective, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I want to clarify is testing. So that message isn't necessarily true for testing. Even though school might say they're test optional, that doesn't mean they're expecting you to send it, and that you're slacking if you don't. So I just want to confirm that that's true for all of you. Excellent. Your nods are good enough for me. Thank you. Another question that's sort of related is, do you all feel that your average test scores have been inflated over the last couple of years with the test optional policy? So in other words, students at this point with high scores are the ones who are sending their scores? Okay. And for those of you who are test optional, are you at a disadvantage if you don't send your test scores? Okay.
This is a great question. I'd love to provide a little bit of context to illustrate what that looks like. So for Macalester, we went test optional in summer of 2020 during COVID, but it was unrelated to COVID that we were going test optional. Before we went test optional, our average median ACT score was about a 31. It is now a 33. And our median SAT score was about a 1400. It's now about a 1450. So naturally, when you go test optional, a lot of students reasonably think my score is not good enough, therefore I'm not going to submit it. And that's totally fair. So yes, if you look at our average test scores now, they're absurdly high. They were pretty high in the first place, but yes, there's been inflation for sure. I think the other component to that is related to sort of, do I still need to submit my scores? What does that look like? For Macalester and for schools who are test optional, the point of going test optional is that we don't want to penalize you for your test score. Now, again, it depends from school to school. For McAllister, in our current first year class, about 50% of those students did not submit a test score for their application, and they are at McAllister. So for us at least, and I imagine for quite a few institutions who are test optional, it really is not a penalty at all to be test optional. If you don't want to submit your scores, that's just one less data point that we look at.
That's helpful. Thank you. A few of you mentioned if you have questions along the way, to feel free to reach out to the admissions office. And I think that's great advice. And keep in mind, there's so much information on each college's admissions website. They're very much up to date. So if you're not sure if a college or university is test optional, most likely you can find that information pretty easily on the college's website. And there's also a resource that I want to point out. It was listed in the slides, but fairtest.org is a website that has compiled a list of all of the colleges in the US that are test optional, test blind, test required. So it's a great way for you to easily find information about a number of schools. So as the student is creating a list later this year and through the summer and in the fall, it's a great way to sort of cross-reference whether or not the school is test optional. Okay, the next question is about demonstrated interest. So not something we've talked about too much tonight. All of you have mentioned how important it is, and Renee mentioned the value in getting to different campuses. And we have a question about whether or not your school or we can kind of touch on types of schools that track demonstrated interest, but especially for students who aren't necessarily able to get on campus, we know there's all sorts of information that's accessible to them online. But do you track online engagement? And maybe each of you can speak about that for your institution.
I actually love this question, mainly because I do get met with, and the phrasing of the question is always fascinating to me. Because if you think about it, every institution will track demonstrated interest. It's how institutions will use that demonstrated interest. Some institutions don't use it as part of their application process. The University of Pittsburgh, we do. So we will track and use demonstrated interest as part of the application process, but not every school does. And so again, that goes back to Ben and Dominique's points throughout the night, which is it depends. So ask that question: does demonstrated interest get tracked? And not only does it get tracked, but is it a part of the application process? The biggest thing I will say though is, as you pointed out, Katrina, there are multiple ways to connect with us. We, especially myself being the regional to New England, reaching out to me, staying in contact with me, even starting, tomorrow as a junior or a junior family, it helps with the process. It helps me stay and connect with you throughout this process. And I'm happy to do it. It's part of my role as an enrollment services manager for Pitt in New England. So I would very much encourage you, if you are making those lists, to reach out to the schools and the counselors in that you're interested in, and then look on the website about how best to visit, whether it's virtually, in person, connecting with the counselor, and all of those things, because it can potentially make an impact on the application process and make that personal connection.
Anything else the two of you want to add about demonstrated interest or whether or not that's important at your institution?
And as John mentioned, we do not use demonstrated interest as a part of our admissions review, but we do track it. We do look to see, who's come to open house, who's come into, who's responding to emails, who's, done a campus visit. But I do also want to make sure, and John kind of touched on as well, that visiting the campus and setting foot is not the only way to show demonstrated interest. It could be when schools have webinars such as this, attending those. If it is continuing to be in contact with your admissions counselor, if they have a regional event in your area, things like that, because they know sometimes it's hard for students to set foot on campus or do that frequently. So do keep in mind that they're tracking demonstrated interest in other ways as well.
For McAllister, we do use demonstrated interest, but it's in a very sort of nebulous, undefined kind of a manner. So we don't have like a point system where if you visit campus, you get a certain number of points, or if you do a virtual info session, you get a certain number of points. Some schools do that. Some schools don't do that. McAllister doesn't. We don't give you like additional bonus points if you send me 1,000 emails during the application process and each email has one question on its own. In fact, that might irritate me personally, and that might not be the best way to engage with me as your admissions officer. I can't speak for anyone else. The way that we think about demonstrated interest and how we use it in our process is in a couple different ways. One thing that John mentioned earlier about like an optional essay, an opportunity to tell us, why are you looking at McAllister specifically? That's an opportunity to demonstrate your interest in my institution, not just in college, but in McAllister College. Did you fill out a supplemental essay? And if so, did you do it well? That's a way we might think of, are you demonstrating interest in us specifically? The other place where it might come into play for us is in years where we do go to our wait list for additional offers of admission near the end of the application process. That's when we might take into serious consideration, if we were going to admit someone from our wait list, we want to make sure that they actually have a serious chance of taking us up on that offer. So if we go to the wait list, we're going to think about, when you said, yes, I want to be on the wait list, did you continue to visit our website? Did you check in with our office? Did you do a virtual experience or webinar? Just to see, like, are you actually interested in us? Or is it radio silence, in which case we have no idea if you actually want to be on our wait list? So that's where it might come into play for McAllister. When we're reading your application in the first place, we're not really paying attention to all those other little things. And there's, again, no checkbox system or point system. So it's a bit more of this intangible way in which we try to understand, how likely are you to engage with us, given the resources available, the counseling you have available, and given your context, how have you engaged with us?
Perfect. Thank you. I think the main message that we want to take away from this is that, it's so important for students and families to get on campuses or to engage with colleges and universities, possibly because it might be helpful in the process, but mostly because it's really valuable for you as the student, the applicant, and certainly the family. You are all, consumers, and you want to be informed consumers in this process and learn all you can to understand it and make sure that this is going to be a good fit for the student. So thank you all very much. Another question about the use of AI. How are you dealing with AI created essays? Are you able to determine that AI has been used?
I would just quickly say 90% of the time you can tell a student didn't write it. I mean, they're good, but they haven't gotten that good at this point. I don't think there's anything wrong with utilizing it as a tool, but if you just drop in the prompt and say, write me an essay, we've read enough of them to kind of be able to point that out, that something just isn't right here. Whether the language doesn't match up with the short essay question, or the language doesn't match up with what we're seeing on the transcript, or email communication, it doesn't match up, especially if you're communicating with a counselor and then they're looking at the essay and like, this doesn't look anything like what I've been receiving for the past 3 months from them. So if you're going to utilize it as a tool, and don't let it do the work for you.
Totally agree with Dominique there. I think the other layer I'd add is using AI to write your essay might be able to write an effective generic essay. We're not looking for generic. We're looking for detail. We're looking for specificity. We're looking to know who you are, what your interests are, what your passions and curiosities are. AI is not going to know that. AI is not going to be able to tell us, AI might be able to tell us that your favorite color is green, but it's not going to be able to tell us why your favorite color is green. And we want the why. So to Dominique's point, use it as a tool, maybe as a spell checker, a grammar checker, whatever. But we want to know about you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dana, you can wrap us up.
I was wondering if John had any other comment on that. Yeah. And I think, the important thing is that this is the essay and the small additional supplements and stuff like that are really the opportunity for the students to have their voice in the process. And you only have one voice, and that's really what the admissions reps want to hear is your voice. And I think that when the counselors work to help support students in their essay writing and their application writing, we too want to make sure that we're hearing your student's voice coming through. We don't want to hear something stock, because that's really what allows them to get to know you as a person and determine whether or not you'd be a good fit for their institution. To that end, I really want to thank John, Dominique, and Ben for joining us this evening in their thoughtful reflections on our questions, and really, and helping us understand their institutions, and how our families and students can move forward in this post-secondary process. Additionally, Renee, Katrina, and Mary Jane, thank you very much from the department. Families and students, again, this has been recorded. We will have this in the slide deck on our website, but we really encourage you to continue to work with your counselors as you navigate this post-secondary process. The one thing I think you've heard loud and clear of, it depends. It depends on the institution. This requires a lot of homework because every institution has something different and nuanced about it that may make it a really good fit for you. So it will be incumbent upon you to ask a lot of questions and do a lot of research in order to determine what's different about these places that you're looking at and why they might be a good place for you to consider applying to. So thank you, panelists. Thank you, department. And thank you, families, for joining us this evening. On our website is the remaining webinars that we have to help support this process, and ones that you'll have next fall with our senior parent evening. So again, touch base with our website to find out when those dates are, so that you can continue this process and being well informed. So have a wonderful evening. And again, we continue to look forward to working with your students and yourselves as parents and guardians in navigating the post-secondary process. Take care.